Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to dig into a tough one for the Huskers. Their game against the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah, tough is one word for it.
You sent us a game recap from Sports Illustrated. I think they used the word hammered more than once.
Hammered is putting it lightly.
No kidding. 56-7, Indiana.
Wow.
Not exactly what you want to see from a team with Big Ten championship aspirations, right?
Not even close. And especially not from a Nebraska team with such high expectations coming into the season.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Indiana has a new head coach this year, Curt Cignetti, but no one had them going undefeated through 4 games. What does this say about how the Big Ten landscape is shifting? And what does it mean for Nebraska?
It's a real wake-up call for the entire conference.
Yeah.
Nebraska got a harsh reminder that there are no easy wins in the Big Ten.
I mean, I know that Indiana's improved, but did you think that they would come out and just dominate like that?
Well, the article pointed out that this Indiana team is playing with a new level of confidence and aggression, and it showed on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, the article talks about their defense constantly pressuring Nebraska's quarterback, giving him absolutely no time to breathe, let alone make plays.
They were relentless. And on the offensive side, Indiana showcased a balanced attack that Nebraska just couldn't handle.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
This wasn't just a bad loss for Nebraska. Like, losing is one thing, right?
Right.
But this brought up some serious historical baggage.
Historical baggage? What do you mean?
So, you ready for this?
Yeah, hit me.
The article goes on to highlight that this wasn't just a bad loss for Nebraska. It brought back some serious historical baggage. Like, this loss was one for the record books.
Oh, really? How so?
This is now one of only 4 times since the 1940s that Nebraska has lost to Indiana by over 40 points.
Wow. 4 times since the 1940s. That's something else.
Talk about adding insult to injury, right?
Oh, kidding. That's rough.
What I found fascinating was that those losses weren't spread out over time either.
Oh, yeah.
They were all clustered together during a 4-year span, right in the middle of World War II.
Wow. It's a completely different context, of course. But I think it highlights the cyclical nature of college football. Programs go through ups and downs, and sometimes those downs coincide with larger events.
It makes you wonder what factors were at play back then. Player availability, wartime morale, who knows what else. But it's a good reminder that these games, for all the passion they ignite, are part of a much bigger picture.
For sure. But let's bring it back to the present. This recent loss, historical echoes aside, exposed some glaring weaknesses for Nebraska.
Yeah, for sure. Let's dive into those. So the article doesn't hold back, highlighting a disastrous kickoff return early in the game that really set the tone. Chicory Barney Jr. fields the ball at the 1-yard line and gets pushed out of bounds.
Talk about starting the game on the back foot. It's not just about field position, it's the psychological impact. You could almost feel the momentum shift.
And momentum, as we know, is huge in football.
Absolutely, and unfortunately for Nebraska, they never really recovered. Their offense, which is typically their strength, sputtered throughout the game.
Yeah, their rushing game was practically non-existent, which is shocking for a team that prides itself on a strong ground attack. The usually reliable ground game only managed a paltry 70 yards.
Yeah.
70 yards, you almost never see that.
It's a far cry from their usual performance. Heinrich Harburg, who led the rushing attack, only managed 32 yards, and most of those were late in the game when the outcome was already decided.
Oh, so if the run game is struggling, the pressure falls on the passing game, right?
Every time.
And it sounds like Nebraska's quarterback, Chubba Purdy, had a rough day at the office. The article mentions multiple interceptions.
3 interceptions, to be exact. Uncharacteristic for Purdy, who has generally been quite careful with the ball.
You think the pressure got to him?
It suggests that Indiana's defensive pressure was getting to him, forcing him into bad decisions.
Okay, so we've got a sputtering offense, special teams blunders, and a quarterback who's clearly feeling the heat. What about the defense? Couldn't they bail them out?
This is where it gets really concerning. Nebraska's defense, known for its stinginess against the run, gave up 5 rushing touchdowns. 5. That's almost unheard of.
5 rushing touchdowns. That's got to be demoralizing for any defense. I mean, they're supposed to be the backbone of this team, known for their ability to shut down opponents' run games.
And yet they were consistently outmaneuvered and outmuscled. It suggests a fundamental breakdown in their defensive scheme, execution, or maybe both.
So we're talking a complete system failure here. Offense, defense, special teams, all misfiring.
Basically.
It sounds like the makings of a long day on the field.
It was. And while we don't want to dwell on the negative, it's important to acknowledge the severity of this loss. It wasn't just about the final score, it was about the way Nebraska was thoroughly dominated in all facets of the game.
And that's got to be a bitter pill to swallow, especially considering the high expectations surrounding this Nebraska team.
No doubt. This loss raises serious questions about their ability to compete at the top of the Big Ten.
So where do they go from here? We'll dig into that and what this means for their upcoming matchup against Ohio State right after a quick break. All right, so we're back and ready to really pick apart this Indiana loss. It was a tough one, and I know that Husker fans are already thinking about what this means for the rest of the season.
Rightfully so. I mean, this wasn't just a loss, it was a system breakdown, like a total reality check for a team that honestly might have started believing their own hype a little too much.
So where do they go from here? Like, what needs the most work?
Well, they got to figure out that run game. 70 yards rushing is almost unheard of for this Nebraska team. They're known for this powerful ground and pound style, and they've got to get back to that identity.
Yeah, the article mentioned Harburg barely making any headway. Is this a personnel issue? Is this an offensive line problem or something else?
Probably a little bit of both, to be honest. I mean, the offensive line wasn't doing him any favors, that's for sure. They weren't creating those holes that Harburg needs to break free. Plus, the article mentioned a couple of key injuries on the offensive line, which definitely didn't help.
Interesting. So some potentially missing pieces there. But beyond the players themselves, what about the play calling? Was there any attempt to adapt when it was clear that the run game just wasn't working?
Honestly, it didn't seem like it. They just looked stuck, like they were almost expecting the run game to magically start clicking. And this is where you really need a good, seasoned offensive coordinator to step up, read the situation, and make those crucial adjustments.
Yeah, it's all about adaptability. So when the run game's not working, it puts more pressure on the passing game.
All the pressure.
And we saw how that turned out, those 3 interceptions from Purdy. That's not what you want to see.
No, not at all. And while, Purdy's got to take some responsibility for those throws, you can't ignore the pressure he was under. That Indiana D-line was like a force of nature.
The article described them as relentless, constantly in Purdy's face, never giving him a moment to just breathe.
Exactly. It was like watching a pack of wolves hunting down their prey. Purdy never really stood a chance.
Okay, we got to talk about this defense. 5 rushing touchdowns allowed. That's got to be keeping the defensive coordinator up at night.
Absolutely. Nebraska's defense is built to stop the run, first and foremost, and they failed miserably in that regard.
And it wasn't just the touchdowns themselves, right? It was the way that Indiana's running backs were gashing them, consistently, all game long, big gains.
It just makes you wonder, was it a scheme issue? Were Indiana's backs just that good? Was it poor execution on Nebraska's part?
You know what they say? Film doesn't lie.
Nope.
I'm sure those coaches are going to be up all week breaking down that game tape, trying to figure exactly where those breakdowns happen.
It'll be a long week.
But look, before we completely write off the Huskers, the article did point out some individual bright spots. There were a few players that really showed up despite, the general gloom.
Right, like glimmers of hope, right. Thomas Fladone, for example, he had himself a day at tight end. He was Purdy's favorite target, caught 6 passes for 91 yards.
That's a career day for Fladone. He could be a real weapon for them moving forward, especially if they can figure out how to get that run game going, take some of the pressure off the passing attack.
For sure. And we can't forget about Ja'Cory Barney Jr. I mean, that opening kickoff return was brutal, but he showed some real guts. He bounced back, scored a touchdown, even set a new personal best with 8 receptions.
Talk about resilience. It would have been so easy to just let that early mistake completely derail his entire game, but he didn't. He kept fighting.
That says a lot about his character, for sure. He's one to watch.
So it's a mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
A crushing loss, some serious weaknesses exposed, but also some individual performances that offer a glimmer of hope. But let's be honest, all eyes are on next week now.
The big one, the game everyone's been talking about.
Nebraska versus the number 4 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes.
And it's an away game, no less.
Oof, talk about being thrown into the fire. After a performance like this, what are the chances of Nebraska turning things around and pulling off an upset?
Honestly, slim to none. Let's be real, this Ohio State team is a whole different beast. They're playing on another level right now. High-powered offense, their defense is giving up next to nothing.
So basically Nebraska's worst nightmare. What can you tell us about this Buckeyes team? What should Nebraska be preparing for?
In a word, everything. They've got a balanced attack, they've got a quarterback who can make all the throws, they have an army of running backs that can just wear you down.
That's not exactly what you want to hear when your defense just gave up 5 rushing touchdowns and your secondary looked about as solid as Swiss cheese.
You're telling me. Not ideal. But hey, Maybe, just maybe, this loss to Indiana, as bad as it was the wake-up call that Nebraska needed. Because Ohio State, they're going to test every single weakness that they put on display.
It's a tall order, that's for sure. What can Nebraska even do to contain this Ohio State offense?
Well, they got to figure out a way to close those gaps in their run defense. That's priority number one. And they cannot, I repeat, cannot give Ohio State's quarterback any time to sit back in the pocket. Bliss packages, disguise coverages, anything to disrupt the rhythm, that's got to be the game plan.
Easier said than done, though, right? I mean, Ohio State's coaches get paid to game plan, too.
Oh, for sure. This is high-level football.
But beyond the X's and O's, there's also the mental game, right?
Always.
How do you recover from a loss like that and then find the confidence to face a team like Ohio State?
That's the million-dollar question. It's about leadership. It's about finding that heart, digging deep, and finding that extra gear when you don't think you have it.
This is more than just a game for Nebraska, I think, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a real test of their character.
Yeah.
Can they bounce back from a loss like this?
Yeah.
Can they rise to the occasion against a top 5 opponent when, frankly, no one is expecting them to?
It's a huge test. And how they respond, win or lose, is going to tell us a lot about the future of this program.
So if you're a Nebraska fan listening to this right now, what should you even be watching for? Besides the obvious, like a win.
Effort. Honestly, effort's number one. I mean, a loss like that can really take the wind out of your sails. They need to come out and show that they haven't given up.
Don't let it break you.
Exactly. They need to prove to themselves and to their fans that they can compete at this level, even when things get tough.
Okay, but speaking of things getting tough, we've painted a pretty bleak picture. Is there anything at all, that Nebraska can hang their hats on going into this game?
Well, I mean, they do have one advantage.
Okay, I'm listening.
Nobody's expecting them to win. After this Indiana game, the pressure's off. They can go out there, play loose, and hey, maybe, just maybe, surprise some people.
The classic underdog story. Sometimes those are the best ones.
You never know. All it takes is a couple of big plays, a lucky bounce here or there, and suddenly the momentum shifts.
Okay, so you're saying there's a chance. A slim one, but a chance.
Look, I'm not putting money on it, let's just say that. Ohio State is the favorite for a reason. But hey, this is college football. Anything can happen on any given Saturday.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's why we watch, right? And hey, even if they don't get the win, this game is still an opportunity, a chance to test themselves against one of the best.
Absolutely. It's all about growth. Win or lose, you learn, you identify the areas where you need to improve, and you get better.
Because let's be real, this Nebraska team is still young. They're still figuring out who they are. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have their ups and downs.
Every team does. It's a journey.
It is. And that journey continues next week in the Horseshoe. Going to be a tough one, I'm not going to lie. But I, for one, am curious to see how they respond.
Me too. It's a real test. Are they going to fold under pressure, or are they going to rise to the challenge? That's what I want to know.
That's the question. And that's why we love college football. All those twists and turns, you never know what's going to happen next. Big thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And to all of you listening out there, we'll be back next week to break down all the action. It's going to be a wild one.